Hello everyone, welcome back to Cello Tips. Today we're going to speak about a somewhat controversial subject, and that is the case against using a continuous vibrato. So this is a subject that many of us are taught to play consistently with the same kind of vibrato, and when you play from note to note, to transfer that vibrato seamlessly throughout a musical line. This is very, very commonly taught. It's widely accepted amongst many teachers and performers around the world even. And I believe that this method is somewhat close-minded and in many ways problematic. First of all, if we think to the very root of what vibrato is, it's a manipulation of pitch, right? So it's something that's actually very unnatural. A pitch at a specific hertz number is a pure tone, and what we are doing with vibrato is distracting the ear from that pure tone. So instead of giving this, we give this. We give everything around that tone instead of just the pure tone. And if you think in nature, in the rest of the world, this is not something that really occurs. If you think of birds singing or whales singing under the sea, you never hear this with vibrato. It would be very unusual if you did. You would think it was very strange. So somehow or other, in music making, it's become normal to use it all the time. And this is a relatively modern thing, actually. We know from treatises from the Baroque era, from the classical era, that vibrato was not used in the same way during those time periods, that in fact it was used more as an ornamental figure. It wasn't something that was just considered part of your normal sound. We also know this from old historical recordings. If you listen to some of the oldest recordings of string playing, you can find some, for example, of the violinist Joseph Joachim on YouTube even. We know from those recordings that continuous vibrato was not accepted as the norm, as it is today. Sure, vibrato was used, but in a very different way than we hear it today. I suggest for you to go and listen to some of those recordings if you're curious and you want to know more. Now, I'm not one that believes we should be stuck in the past and always play in the historically correct way or just replicate everything from a different time period. I think we do live in our own time period and we should make the most of that. But that being said, I do think there's a case to be made for no longer looking at vibrato as just part of your normal sound. For one thing, it's incredibly monotonous, and for some reason it's just considered normal in our modern day world to use the same vibrato all the time, when if you were to do that with your bow, for example, it would be ridiculous. If you were to play only with the exact same bow speed, same contact point, same technique for every single note you play, it would be absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Or I mean, it can take it even further. You say, if you are only to play the exact same note for the rest of your life, if you're only going to play this F natural for the rest of your life, it's incredibly silly. So vibrato is a tool that we have, just as the bow is, just as changing notes with the left hand is. And it's something that we should utilize as an artistic tool. And some might say, well, the most beautiful sound is one with a good, healthy, wide vibrato. And if you believe that, that's fine. But you can also believe that the most beautiful scent is that of a rose. But if we don't have all of the other scents in the world, if everything smells like a rose, then the scent of a rose is no longer beautiful. Because there's no variety and there's no context. It's no longer unique. Now, the next point is that vibrato does distract from the musical content, from the bare bones musical harmonic content. If a composer writes a harmony, a chord, and you as a cellist are to play one voice in that harmony, or multiple, maybe the entire harmony by yourself, you are reflecting the music that that composer wrote. And if you want to do that in the purest, most respectful way, I think it would be worth it to have the priority be to hear that harmony, to hear what was written. Yeah. And vibrato, as I said earlier, is something that distracts from the pitch. Yeah. It makes it harder to hear that pure tone. And as a matter of fact, a whole nother video could be made about this, but it's something that I think is also extremely important and widely misunderstood, is that the cello, by nature, in reality, is often an accompanimental instrument, more often than not, in chamber music, in orchestra, etc. You know, even in sonatas, often. And when you are serving as accompaniment, that means your role is to provide harmony. Yeah. And in providing harmony, you want to give a foundation for the melody to soar above, to float on top of, in whichever way is artistically appropriate. But when you're providing that harmony, that bass, to me, it seems that choosing to vibrate those notes dramatically is entirely against the point of what you're there to provide. Because when you're vibrating those notes dramatically, well, two things. First of all, you are drawing attention to yourself, to the bass notes, rather than the melodic material. And secondly, you're not giving a pure tone. So you're making it more difficult to understand, for the ear to understand what is the harmonic material, what is the musical material. So I'm of the opinion that if I'm listening to the greatest masterpieces of classical music, I want to hear the actual music. I want to hear the purpose of each note within its context. You know, I want to understand that in a pure way. And again, vibrato is something that often distracts from that, especially in harmonic material, which the cello is often responsible for. Now, another thing that I find to be very, very common amongst string players and cellists especially is that they use vibrato as a way to cover up bad intonation and bad bow work. Oftentimes they don't even realize it themselves. But if you are so used to vibrating so much, when I vibrate, my finger is not in the same place at all times. That's the whole point of vibrato, is that you're changing the connection spot on the string. And if you're doing that, it means that, well, one could never really say if it's in tune or not, because you're constantly shifting in and out of being in tune. And so a lot of intonation is avoided that way and covered up that way. And if you would like to use that as sort of an excuse and as a way to cheat out on practicing good intonation, you know, that's your choice. But if your goal is to give the most respect to the great music that we're playing, and for that music to be heard in its most pure way, I would suggest not using that as a cop-out method. Also, when we are so focused on creating our vibrato, whatever that means, all the time, it takes you away from thinking about what you're doing with your bow. And the bow is greatly more responsible for affecting and producing your sound than the vibrato is. So if this is a habit that you have of consistently vibrating every single note, and it's just something that you don't think about because maybe that's the way you were taught or it's just a habit, I would suggest for you to try and dramatically reverse that at first, so that your basis, your go-to, is non-vibrato. And then from there, see where you want to put the vibrato in for it to be used as an expressive addition to what you're playing. Not taking something away, but adding something to the beautiful pure tones that you're creating as a basis. Yeah. So as always, this is my opinion. Of course, I believe it very strongly, and I use this in my own playing. I know that many people disagree with what I've said here, and that's their opinion. And at the end of the day, you need to form your own. But my opinion on this happens to be something that I have not heard a lot expressed by teachers and pedagogues around the world. And so I thought it would be a good idea to share this, to share these thoughts, because I think many people will find that they do make sense at the end of the day, and they might connect with them. So I personally would encourage you to try some of these things for yourselves. See how it makes you feel about your sound, about your phrasing and such. And by all means, go for it and tap into whatever you do in your music that moves you. I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. So, hope this was interesting to you, hope it helps, and I'll see you next time.